This week I'm joined by Cathy, who tells me about how reading a book led her to move to Japan. She didn't know why, but she just knew she had to do it. That started a journey of self-discovery and led to Cathy finding love. We talk about past lives and the effect that they can have on current relationships. We also talk about the importance of trusting yourself and bringing joy into everything that you do. I'm your host, Dashankar, and you're listening to That Was the Moment. A book set me on my path to self-discovery and finding love. My guest today is Cathy. Cathy is a passionate advocate for the inner emotional world of boys, a journey that began when a life-changing incident with her son at age 3 ignited a decades-long mission. Her transformative moments include reading a book at 30 that led to her changing countries, discovering a spiritual path through another book several years later, and defying the odds to give birth to her son despite less than a 1% chance of pregnancy. Thank you so much for being here, Cathy.
Thank you for inviting me.
So why don't we start with what life was like before you moved?
The first really big moment in my life, I would say, was when I made the move from countries. So before that all happened, that was when I had just turned 30. So I sometimes put it to like a midlife crisis that was a little bit early. But I had moved from one side of Canada to the other. I was searching for something, didn't know really what it was. Before it all kind of fell into place, I was struggling, felt very untethered, I guess. I just was not peaceful inside. The year before it all happened, I had decided to do some serious work on myself and had some counseling and that kind of changed things for about a year, and things were going in a good direction, basically. I wasn't sure what was going to happen in my future, but I was sure if I stayed on the path that I was on, that it was not going to turn out very well. And at that particular point is when I came across a book from a secondhand shop, or a friend gave it to me. I don't really remember, but I do remember the book. And it was James Clavell and Shogun. And I ended up really getting hooked on James Clavell because I thought he was just a marvelous writer. But what happened that had never happened before is while reading the book and after reading the book, I was completely positive that I was supposed to go to Japan, that I was being drawn to go to Japan, and that's what I was supposed to be doing. But it was strange because I had no interest in Asia. I had no understanding of it. I had no reference to go from. There was nothing. That was never on my radar before. So it was very much out of the blue. But I really trusted that belief, that sense that that's what I was supposed to be doing, even though logically it didn't make any sense. So within 3 months, I packed everything up, got a job in Japan, and that started everything.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's go back to like the very beginning when you said you were feeling untethered. So was there something that happened in your life to make you feel like that, or what was causing that?
Now I can tell you what the feeling, like what that was all about, because I've lived twice the amount of life that I had lived, more than twice than I had lived at that point. And now I would tell you that behavior that I was having, the unsettlingness of my being, was that I didn't understand what was impacting how I was seeing life, how I was viewing it. So now I can clearly see that some of it all is connected with being an infant and being hospitalized and almost dying, and the story that goes with that. But what comes from that, because of the time of that happening, was that I seem to have a lot of attachment issues. Mm-hmm. So I'm very insecure about losing people. And so there's always something that is not secure, not as safe in my own feeling of myself. And I think that was kind of maybe the root of some of it. Some of the things that go with that condition. You can have problems with addictions or relationships that aren't beneficial, or that kind of life. But at that time, I didn't know that. I just knew that this was not this was not where I was supposed to be.
Yeah. And now tell me more about the book. So is
And
it based in Japan?
it was old Japan. The truth of it is, it wasn't really the story, because I'm an avid reader. I love books. But it wasn't that it was the story, although I really enjoyed it. It was the knowing when I read the story that there was a message I was supposed to be getting out of this. And it wasn't connected with the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I find it very interesting that you say that you had like attachment issues, yet this book was spurring you on to leave everything you used to.
Yeah.
And so you decided to follow your inner guidance or the
Mhm.
inner knowing. People call it different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and what did everyone around you think about this?
Well, it's funny when I think of it, like it would have been completely different today
Mm,
if I did it
yeah.
today, because people could react. Like they could send me a note immediately. Whereas I was living on the west coast of Canada, the rest of my family was on the east coast. And I wasn't telling anyone until I knew for sure I was going. And that was dependent upon getting the job. But as fate would have it, that came through quite quickly. But the neck of it was that I had to leave almost immediately from the time that the job was guaranteed. So by the time a letter, because there's no email at that time, by the time the letter gets back to the East Coast, it's too late. Kind of, she's gone, she's done it again. At that point, I think my family just, I didn't fit any mold.
Mm,
And yeah, I don't know what they thought really, because it was like 5 years before I got back home again from the last time I had visited them. And I don't think we ever really talked about it, to be honest.
And so, okay, you turn up to Japan. I'm guessing you didn't speak the language.
Didn't speak it, couldn't read it,
Never
didn't
been
know
there.
anything about the culture, didn't know anybody. No.
Wow. Tell me about your life in Japan.
That was another thing. And I think it was the reason um, that I needed to go there. First of all, within the first month and a half, something happened with the job that was connected with visas, which I had been told to come without the work visa, and it was fine beginning to work and then go out when the red tape was all done and that kind of thing. But the reality was that something else happened in that company that put them on the radar of immigration. So after a month and a half, I was told to stay away from the school completely, have my bag packed by my apartment door just in case, but I would get my salary for the year. And so that year, I had no external influences. I was totally in my own head. I could not read, I couldn't write, I couldn't talk to anyone, I couldn't understand any side conversations.
Mm.
There was nothing except me getting in my own head. And that was maybe the best therapy I ever had.
Yeah, you had no distractions. So that is quite an extreme way to get to know yourself.
It is, but such a gift, such a gift.
Yes.
Couldn't have happened any other way.
Mm. And what were you finding out about yourself? Do you recall?
I remember one moment that was a real head shaker for me. I had met a lovely young Japanese, well, a little bit younger than me, just by a few years. And she was an English teacher someplace. And we met by chance. But we became friends, and she kind of took me under her wing. And she reminded me of, I would call her a Japanese version of Cyndi Lauper at the time. Like she was just a really fun young lady. And we were going into the city on one of the weekend nights, two young single women dressed up, ready to party and have a good time. And we were on the trains going into the city. And she and I were sitting on one side, and on the other side, there was a group of maybe high school kids. They were still in their school uniforms and everything, but they were all sitting there. And they obviously were talking about me.
Mm.
I sat there for a while and then I turned to my friend and I said, you know, that's really rude. I stood out like a sore thumb. I was the only foreigner in the town that I was living in. I was the only foreigner in the school that I started to work in. So I was an odd one. So I said to my friend, you know, that I thought it was rude that they were talking about me. I could see they were talking about me. And she looked at me and she said, well, you know, they're saying how beautiful your eyes and your hair are. Like they're saying all the good things. And I thought, wow, that was not, I assumed they
Mm-hmm.
were being negative about me. I had that kind of a chip on my shoulder, you know. And that was a big one for me. That was a really big turning point.
And how long did you end up staying in Japan for?
I came over with a 2-year contract. Stayed the first time I stayed for 19 years
Wow.
and got married, which I was never doing, had a child, which I was never doing. And then we left when he had finished elementary school and we went to Beirut, to Lebanon, and stayed there for his middle school and high school. Then when he left, then I moved into administration levels. And so we went for 2 years to Bangkok and a year to Tbilisi, Georgia, and then a year to Doha. And then we came back to Japan. So we
Mm-hmm.
came back for 3 years in Tokyo, 2 years in Hiroshima, and now in Itoshima, where we've retired. So 28 years total.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting that Japan is where you have settled, given that you had no idea about it. Do you know why it was Japan? Why not any other country in the world? Do you feel an affinity to Japan or Japanese culture or food or
No, no, not at all. I honestly believe that I was drawn here because I was supposed to meet my husband. And by meeting my husband, it opened the door to having a child. And so that is why I think I was brought here.
yeah. And going back to the very start and the attachment issues that you had dealt with when you were in Canada, how how did those play out throughout the years, being away from your family, being away from everything you knew? Did did you attach to people in Japan, or were you finding actually I'm okay on my own?
I think because I had a partner, but not initially because I didn't trust anybody initially. So, but over time, I began to trust him and
Mhm.
trust that no matter, you know, how off the wall I went, he was going to be there. And it took
Mhm.
time for that. But that gave me a security. It showed up more like over the years. Where it showed up was every time I had to say goodbye. So if I went home to visit, or if when my son was older, if he was going back to university or back to Canada, every time that I needed to say goodbye to someone, I would just crumble. And it would take me a good 24 hours to get over it.
And so it sounds like you've done some, I guess, inner child work, or
Done a
how did
lot
you?
of work.
How, oh, you've done a lot, yeah. And yeah, is that how you got to the, I guess, the root cause of going into hospital as an infant, and what sort of stuff did you do? Because I'm always interested in how people get to that understanding of themselves.
Hmm. Well, well, that would take me to the second, you know, that was the moment.
Do it. I'm excited.
Well, I was here and it was maybe the third year I was here or around that time. But I had been off and on in a relationship with a Japanese guy for about 2 years. The last time that we broke up was just before Christmas holidays, maybe more so because of my attachment issues. Every time the breakups happened, it would be very, very difficult. So over that period, over that winter period when I was really struggling, there was some social gathering with a group of friends, and somebody gave me a book, and it was Dick Sutphen, You Were Born to Be Together Again, or something like that. And that book was kind of like, this is dynamite stuff. So this was in the beginning of the New Age movement,
Mm.
basically. So I'd always tinkered and been interested, but not, to the extent I was going to get into it. So this book was about, past lives and, that kind of concept of sometimes the relationships you're in are not totally based on the current relationship. They could be based on past relationships, which I found very interesting. But what happened was that, again, this is the time before internet. So at the back of the book, it was talking about the author, and it said that he had this newspaper that you could subscribe for. And so I sent, my little note in. And so I started, once a month getting this newspaper. And at one point, there was an advertising for their summer conference kind of thing that this author led. I don't know if it was a week or 10 days. It was in Phoenix, Arizona. But every day had, 2 or 3 different New Age leaders, I guess. So again, it spoke to me. And because I was in education, I had summers off. And that summer, I was scheduled to go home to Canada. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to make a pit stop in Phoenix. So I went to this conference, which was just, I was so out of my depth. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never heard of half of the things that were going on. It was a blast. It was like I was floating on a cloud the whole time. One of the very cool things was I chose to have a past life regression. And I had this regression, and I said I would like to try to understand why this relationship I'm having is so, conflicting to me, because I was allowing things that I would never allow in another relationship. And we kept, going and stopping and going. And so did this past life regression that was it was like this big, that's why I did something wrong to that person in a previous life. And I was still trying to make up for it now. So that was just a real eye opener. I came back, the guy picked me up at the airport, and I said, "You're not going to believe this. We never have to break up again because we're never going to be together again. And isn't this great?" And I was all pumped up, and he thought, "Oh shit, there she goes again." But that started something for me that helped me open my eyes to a bigger lens, I guess. And that was the big start for a lot of growth.
Wow. That's I love the sound of that book. I think I'm going to try and find it. And because when I was asking you earlier about Japan, so I never know who I can say, do you think you lived in Japan in a past life? So, because so many people are just so can't even think of the concept of a past life. But
they're
for
kind
me,
of judgmental too. So you have to be careful. I listened to some of your episodes, so I knew it was safe. So
I've had conversations with some friends about past lives, and I'm like, my God, I did this regression. And they're kind of like, okay. So yeah, but I'm glad that we can talk about this. Because I was thinking, did you live in Japan in a past life? Is that why you're called to it? But now hearing you also needed to be in Japan to meet this person to clear this block from a past life.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah. And have you done many past life regressions since then?
Only one other one at the same conference, actually. Again, another eye opener. All of it was in Europe or North America. So there was nothing in this part of the world at all.
Crazy. I know with me, when I'm struggling with a relationship, similar to you, I've done actually quite a few past life regressions. And it's interesting because I log them in my diary and I look at the themes that come up, and I find that I'm living those themes over and over and over and over again. It's only been in the last, say, 2 or 3 years where I've kind of thought, do you know what? I'm not doing it anymore. It's actually since I've discovered the Akashic records that I've now said to myself, I'm rewriting these records because I'm done with living that kind of groundhog life, not even day, having the same experiences. And I've always found that doing the past life regressions have given me so much peace and understanding, and have allowed me to go, okay, that's why now it's time to say goodbye. It's time to move on. Um, and
So
then
when
I've had
things
these,
don't make sense, they can make sense in another concept. So
yeah,
it's,
because
yeah,
sometimes things don't make sense. You're like, why am I kind
absolutely.
of like almost like addicted to this person? And it's like, why do I keep going back to that?
I think one part is when you can, if you can get to, is it connected with another,
Hmm.
time? But the other thing I believe, and that has really impacted me, was I think that consistently we are being presented with challenges, and if we are really conscious about how we are handling those um, challenges, we have an opportunity to get past them and not have to have those same challenges again.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think for me with the relationships, it was I kept being given the opportunity, and but I
You just
wasn't
weren't learning the
getting there.
lesson.
That's right. But once you do, and those challenges, those same types of challenges seem to
Hmm.
disappear.
And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine before I was meeting the same person, just in a different body.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it was only until I was able to do the work on myself, which included me doing the past life regression to get proper understanding. And also, I've I think it was not just like going into a past life, but going into early life. So, kind of the inner
Hmm.
child stuff. And all of that gave me the realizations that I needed to be sure that I don't want to continue on this pattern. And once I made that conscious decision, those people, the same people in different bodies, stopped appearing. They still try and come in occasionally, and I'm like,
Hmm.
no.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's about having that self awareness.
I think it's self awareness, as well as I don't think life needs to be so hard. I think
Mm-hmm.
we make it hard. And I think if we are really mindful of what we're doing in our heads, um, I think it can be easier. And I think the more that we can focus on, I don't like, I know it sounds airy fairy, but really focusing on joy and love. 4 years ago, after retiring, I started up a business, and it was like burning the candle at both ends. And in order to fill up some spiritual needs that I find myself depleting and going down a bit of a hole, and so I'd start listening. I love podcasts, and at that time I didn't have time for doing a lot of reading. So I'd go out for 2 hour walks along the beach and listen to this stuff. And what I kept coming back to was that if I'm doing something, even if it's work, it's like, is this bringing me joy? And if it's not, can I change it or adapt so that it can bring me joy? And if it doesn't, if I can't fit it into those two categories, there's something wrong with me doing it. Like
Yes.
either the thing has to change or I have to change. But to
Your
keep
mindset
doing,
about the thing.
yes,
Yeah.
doing something that's just kind of like, oh, I got to get this done today, that doesn't bring you joy. And so then it doesn't bring you peace. And if that's the state of your kind of energy, then that's what you're going to pull in. So the more you can stay in that feeling, even if it's tough, like I'm not saying it's not like not tough things, but if you can find the joy in it somehow. Someone said something, and it's one of those lines that kind of stays well in my thinking. But instead of saying that something happens to you, because that's
Mm.
often what people say, why
Yeah.
did that happen to me? Like if you switch that and just say or believe it's happening for you, not
Hmm.
to you, so that even in the real, crappy times, there's something good that's going to come out if you keep searching for it.
Yeah. I was reading something or listening to something. The author was talking about how happiness is one of those feelings that it sometimes can be very hard to sustain for a long period, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone wants to be happy, but happiness is a state that is hard to maintain because life happens. However, if you can find delight and joy in every day, you're closer to happiness. And I love the way that she explained that because I think it's so true. We all strive to be happy and expect that happiness is an end goal, but it's not. It's something
Mm.
that we have to keep working at, like anything in life, whether
Yes.
it's a relationship, a friendship, career. You don't just get to be happy and then that's it. You've got to sustain the happiness in some way, and
Yeah.
through finding things that bring you joy or delight, as she talked about it.
Yeah. Same idea. Yeah, I believe that too.
And so what is life like for you now?
I'll just back up a little bit because
Mm.
when we left Japan, I said that was it for me. I put in 19 years, didn't know, where we would retire, but I was done with Japan. And at some point along the next however many, years, my husband asked me, he said, "So what do you need?" Because we did start to look. We looked at places in Canada. And I, jokingly said, "I'm quite happy to have a little hut on the beach and, when the time comes, just, fade out in a little rowboat and that's the end of it." But then he asked me, he said, "So, you know, what do you need?" And so I listed off, a number of things. I said, I need to see the water. Maybe we'll never be able to afford to be on the water, but I need to sit at my desk, be able to write and see the water. I needed to move into a space that we could pay cash for. We didn't have a lot of cash. Needed to be someplace that was as deeply immersed in nature as possible and still be safe as far as
Mhm.
health access and things like that. And to be able to see more wildlife than human. So in my mind, there's no way that's Japan. We're a heavy populated area. And my husband found everything. So my life right now is as close to perfect, really, as it can be. We have this little place, and all my requirements are met. My brother moved to Japan and his wife is Japanese. My adult son just moved here a year ago with his wife, and I do see more wildlife every day than humans on most days.
That's amazing. That's some great manifesting skills right there. But I also love how you knew exactly what you wanted, and then you
Mhm.
said, and then just kind of threw it to the universe, like, yeah,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
that's my wish, and it came to you.
very much so.
What advice would you give to that 30-year-old version of yourself who was feeling untethered and just insecure?
Well, if she was in the current world, I would encourage her to keep searching, be curious, wonder, and never stop questioning, that you will figure it out, that there is nothing wrong with you, and perhaps what other people see as your challenges really are your superpowers.
That is beautiful advice. And I think that advice can be taken by anyone.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
to trust yourself. Like, if I hadn't listened to that feeling, I don't know where my life would have gone, but I doubt I would be sitting here saying that I just have a beautiful life. So I think that's the most important thing. Trust yourself. We all have it inside, but you have to trust that you do have it.
and following that inner knowing, if your heart, your higher self, your soul, whatever you want to call it, if it's calling out for something, trusting that, following that. On one of the episodes, I actually had a conversation with someone who had this similar knowing that she had to move to Peru. We had the same conversation, just honoring yourself,
Yes.
and in the little ways and the big ways. And I think that's really, yeah, really important.
I think sometimes too, when you're facing some kind of a decision or it could be a challenging choice, most people ask themselves why. Why? And I think if you ask yourself, well, why not? Like, if your reasons for not doing it, like, I was 30 years old, like, why not? Why not pack my suitcases and leave everything that I know behind me and see what happens? Why not? Rather than why would you ever do something like that? You don't know anything about where you're going. Nothing is secure, nothing is stable. So just asking yourself why not sometimes gives you that courage to jump off the cliff.
And also the room to invite amazing experiences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, your mindset is everything.
Yes, definitely. Is there anything else that you'd want to share with us today?
No, I would just like to say that this is the first time I've had this kind of a conversation, and I have never talked about this in a platform that I didn't know who was going to hear it. And again, maybe my age and stage, I'm really trying to be more vulnerable and and speak my truth. And if someone doesn't like it, that's not my issue. That's, my issue is standing firm with my experiences. And if they resonate with somebody, that kind of, if I could do it, you can do it. So that kind of feeling. So
And,
thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome. I've really enjoyed today's conversation. And I think part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is I want people to know that there's more out there for them. Because I know for me, I used to listen to podcasts to hear about how did people get these amazing lives,
Yep.
and I used to think that was for them, not for me.
Yeah.
And it's only, as you said, when you have that courage to make a change and believe in yourself, believe in your knowing, that you can make your dreams come true.
Yes, I do think that the only limitations that we all have are those that we put on ourselves, without any doubt.
If you could be remembered by one word, what would that word be?
Honesty. I'm an honest person, and I value that almost above everything else.
Amazing. And do you feel that back when you were 30, you weren't living your life honestly, or maybe not honestly, but honest to yourself?
I think I felt so much pain that I couldn't really tap into who I was. So I was still developing who I was, but it was too painful to pull back too many layers too quickly. So I don't think it was that it was dishonest. I don't think I knew myself.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Cathy. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I love when I get to talk about past lives.
Me too. It's been a real pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for doing this kind of a podcast. It's very cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. I hope today's conversation empowers you and inspires you to know that no matter your current situation, your life can change too. All it takes is a moment. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it with a friend. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thatwasthemoment. Until next time, be present in each moment, because you never know when your moment will come, or when you have the gift of being a moment for someone else. Take care.